There are many astonishing ancient structures located within India. Arguably, some of the most intricately detailed structures to be found anywhere on Earth. We have, in the past, covered a number of these structures, not only due to the astonishing detail displayed upon their stonework, but also many other compelling, enigmatic details that, to this day, remain unexplained. A personal recommendation for an alternative archaeological researcher of Indian ruins is Praveen Mohan over at Phenomenal Travel Videos. Yet, due to the countless ancient anomalies that can be found within India, we rarely step on each other's proverbial feet. For example, during my own personal research, I have not only found that many of the hillside temples, seemingly hewn from the bedrock of Earth, would, even to this day, be incredibly difficult to replicate, if not impossible. With some of the most astonishing, not only attached to religious belief and historical rumor to a mountain in the Himalayas, a factor we have also previously covered, with my personal observations, regardless of the fact that many locals pertain to it being an ancient pyramid, discovered noticeable evidence of the entire base of the mountain, once having been hewn into an artificial crescent. Also remains unclear is if the entire mountain is a man-made pyramid, disguised by the erosion of many millennia. The research team claimed, quote, "The stratum is horizontal with the layers of stone, slightly varying in color. The dividing lines show up clear and distinct, which gives the entire mountain the facade of having been built by giant hands of huge blocks of reddish stone." End quote. With the stone quarried out to create the astonishing temples, an accepted artistic masterpiece, just like Yongyu Cave in China, have never been found. Additionally, during my own pursuit for clues as to how, and indeed who, could have created such temples, I have identified signature tool marks in several areas that match that of many other ancient ruins, indeed such as Yangshan Quarry, also in China, providing strong evidence that whoever was responsible for these ruins may have indeed been the same civilization, or, as our Atlantean videos have postulated, were commanded to be constructed by a dominant civilization, sharing such technologies with the native populations, employing them to create such wonders. Thus, this would also explain the matching signatures of advanced stone-cutting tool marks found on different continents. Like our research into the variation into ancient stone clamps, a method that was undeniably shared throughout the globe, yet the methods of creating such clamps and the resulting metallurgy varies from continent to continent. As we have previously stated on many occasions, whoever was responsible for these incredible ancient sites seemingly vanished at some point within antiquity, leaving many ancient quarries and temples unfinished. One of the temples that we use to link the tool marks with other sites around the world, Vetivan Koil, one of the precious, abandoned sites that, like so many other ancient advanced ruins that were being built around the world, vitally shows the rough stone-cutting signatures left by an advanced machinery that was once responsible for their initial cutting, this before the refinement of such structures' carvings. With many other sites in India that, due to their geographical positioning and thus protection from erosion, still possesses these same signature tool marks. However, the purpose of today's video is probably one of the most peculiar anomalies in India, and could be perceived by some as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence of advanced ancient machinery having once been responsible for these ancient structures. Known as the Tanjore Brihadiswarar Temple, which was supposedly constructed by the Cholas. However, the temple possesses a characteristic which was not only out of the capabilities of the Cholas dynasty, but to me, is compelling proof of a pre-Diluvian civilization having been responsible for its construction. As atop the temple, at a height of 216 feet above ground level, is a solid lump of granite carved with perfection, yet has been realized at an astonishing weight of 80 tons. To put that in perspective, according to academia, an ancient culture with no advanced technologies, especially lifting technologies, a dynasty well studied and explored by modern academia. The heartland of the Cholas was the fertile valley of the Kaveri River. Although their power was considerable and was probably complemented by such claimed of astonishing feats of architecture, regardless, the question remains: how did this civilization raise such an enormous stone? It seems to us that such claims were merely made to impress their enemies and allies, and the fact that academia is severely lacking any explanation as to how such a feat was accomplished strongly supports my suspicion that the temple is in fact an antediluvian ruin, and as such, highly compelling. There are many ancient out-of-place artifacts that we feel, due to academia's domination of popular opinion, are easily hidden away beneath a veil of secrecy. Countless intriguing, unexplained artifacts, all condemned to a mundane modern conspiracy pertaining to their true origins. Objects that, ironically, cannot be explained by these same individuals' so-called learned opinions, a fact that must clearly be beknownst to them, yet seemingly overlooked by the majority of the general public. We have previously covered many artifacts that, thanks to their existence, contradict most of modern academic opinion regarding the chronological timelines for the development of man. Many metallic artifacts, for example, that either due to their purity, size, or elemental rarity, fly in the face of currently attested views regarding their possible age. Developed undeniably through far more advanced techniques than were available to our more modern descendants, we have even covered extraterrestrial gold, once owned by Tutankhamun, now argued as having come to Earth via meteorites. These artifacts indicate a far more interesting, far older story for their origins, and indeed their creators, than academia would like you to believe. Beth Shearim, an ancient gigantic glass slab we have previously covered. It was once found within Galilee. Just like our object of focus, the Beth Shearim slab was unquestionably created within a refinery, far too enormous for our well-studied, more modern ancestors. Just like the Beth Shearim slab, this enormous metal disc, recently uncovered within Java, simply cannot be explained with primitive ancient smelting techniques. Indeed, the melting, casting, and hammering of this amount of iron into such an enormous iron dish, according to academic views on history, is currently unexplainable, making the iron disk of Java an out-of-place artifact. Predictably, after the successful excavation of the artifact and the careful, painstaking placement of it upon a transport lorry, it was mysteriously destroyed on the way to the museum, where it would have been on public display in full view of inquisitive minds. Clearly, once a pot of enormous proportions, and indeed once of a huge weight that, although most of these tons have rusted away, the movement of such required the utilization of a crane and transport lorry, a fact conveniently absent from any media explanations as to its ancient origins or usage. Who made the giant dish of Java? How did they make it? What did they use it for? Unfortunately, due to its destruction, it may slip away into the chasm of history, as with many other ancient OoPArt's, missed by most and avoiding their deserved exposure within the modern age. Within a place called Laos, a landlocked country in the heart of the Indo-Chinese peninsula, is probably one of the most confusing archaeological sites on Earth. We have often covered possible evidence left within countless newspaper archives, logged witness testimonies, and indeed many stolen bodies, of a type of ancient human far larger than we are today. Additionally, there have been many intriguing ancient giant artifacts which have been found at many sites around the world, tools, utensils, and structures, created in such scales they would be virtually useless in the hands of modern-sized people. and our archaeological site within Laos could perhaps be seen as one of the more compelling remnants, possibly left by this gigantic race of humans. However, what is seemingly the most perplexing mystery regarding this site is the aptly named Frogman, discovered at the center of this entire historical puzzle. Known as the Plain of Jars, it is an enormous ancient site, littered with countless giant stone jars, manufactured to such a scale they are clearly too large for any practical use by humans of today. Numbering over 400 at just one site, the original purpose for these stone jars high up in these locations, if indeed they were manufactured by our ancient ancestors, is a question which has evaded modern explanation and may remain impossible to answer. Out of the many hundreds of jars, it would seem none were ever decorated. All remained completely blank, except one single jar. A single giant jar adorned with the image of a frogman. According to academia, the jars date from the Iron Age around 500 BC, although any compelling reasoning for this remains elusive. It is undoubtedly one of the most important prehistoric sites in Southeast Asia, and it undoubtedly deserves more attention. Who carved these enormous jars? Why make them to such enormous and thus impractical sizes? Where did the stone come from? Or indeed, how were they carried to their final resting places high up on these plateaus? Were they possibly made by a race of giants? Who is our frogman character? Was this single image a signature, left by the original makers of these giant jars? Unfortunately, we may never know.
Beit Sherim is an ancient cemetery located within Galilee. Very close by is a natural cave. It had apparently fallen into disuse at the end of the 4th century and filled up partially with 4 or 5 feet of clay-like silt. In 1956, a bulldozer was taken in to clear the rubble, but what it would uncover can be seen as an enormous OoPArt, an out-of-place artifact. It turned out to be a large ancient rectangular slab made from an unknown material. Because of its size, measuring 6.5 by 11 feet long, 18 inches thick and weighing in at over 9 tons, it was not surprisingly left where it lay. With a perfectly level surface, its origins were a mystery, yet alas, at the time, not a pressing one. However, in 1963, members of a joint expedition of the Corning Museum of Glass and the University of Missouri would bring to light a curious reality. While surveying the region for possible remains of ancient glass factories, someone suggested that the Beit Sherim slab might have been made of glass. A suggestion initially perceived as a joke. Amazingly, chemical analysis was indeed carried out, confirming that this enormous and extremely ancient slab was indeed made of glass. It is therefore believed that the Beit Sherim slab is a huge piece of first-stage glass, meant to have been broken up and fashioned into objects somewhere else, that for some reason was abandoned right where it was made. In conclusion, several factors surrounding the existence of the slab are currently unexplainable. According to mainstream views surrounding the evolution of glassmaking, the production of such an enormous base material would have been simply impossible, requiring over 12 tons of raw materials, over 20 tons of furnace fuel, the maintaining of a temperature of over 1100 degrees centigrade for no less than 5 continuous days, finally producing a 9-ton slab of perfectly level, perfectly rectangular glass, clearly demonstrates the requirement of a highly advanced refinery with highly advanced technologies harnessed by a past civilization. Additionally, at the time of its discovery, only 2 other pieces of glass have ever been created that are larger. Both rest within the enormous telescopic mirrors of machines developed within the past century. It seems clear to us that the Beit Sherim slab is one of those rare gems that clearly demonstrates the past existence of a highly advanced, highly capable ancient civilization that once lived and was unfortunately lost here on Earth.